She walked into the glittering ballroom with her head high, unaware that tonight her dignity would be tested in front of the world's elite. A single act, so cruel, so humiliating, would shatter the illusion of elegance that surrounded her. In seconds, laughter turned to silence, and the mask of glamour revealed something darker, the raw face of racism hiding behind privilege. But what no one expected was how she responded, and how her response would bring a $4 billion empire to its knees. The question is, how does one moment of hate unravel everything? She wasn't just another guest at the gala. She was a woman who had worked her way into rooms most people only dream of. Her name was Maya, a brilliant strategist whose ideas had saved corporations billions. She carried herself with quiet confidence, her presence commanding respect even in circles where wealth and lineage mattered more than merit. Tonight, she stood beneath chandeliers dripping with light, surrounded by people who smiled but measured worth by last names and fortunes. For Maya, this evening was meant to mark a milestone. A partnership worth $4 billion was on the table, and her sharp mind had been key in bringing it this far. Yet as she moved through the crowd, she felt it. The subtle glances, the whispered judgments, the unspoken question. Did she really belong here? What Maya didn't know was that the test of belonging wouldn't come from a boardroom negotiation. It would come in the form of one reckless act, a public humiliation so sharp it would silence the room and expose the truth these walls tried so hard to hide. The gala was alive with champagne laughter and glittering gowns, but Maya could sense the undercurrent the moment she walked in. Polite smiles lingered just a fraction too short. Conversations hushed when she passed, then resumed in muffled tones. It wasn't new to her. She had learned to carry the weight of being the only one in countless boardrooms. But tonight, the stares felt sharper, more deliberate. As she navigated through the crowd, she caught fragments of whispers. "Who brought her? She's not from here." The words slid under her skin like ice. Still, she straightened her shoulders, reminding herself why she was there. This deal wasn't just about billions. It was about showing the world that brilliance and vision weren't bound by bloodlines or old money. But privilege has a way of testing people in cruel, casual ways. At the center of the ballroom, a towering cake gleamed under golden lights. Guests gathered, laughter echoing, as the heiress of the host family, young, entitled, and draped in diamonds, took the stage. Her voice was syrupy sweet, thanking everyone for attending, yet her eyes never left Maya. Then it happened. In a move so quick and jarring it stole the air from the room, the heiress scooped her manicured hand into the cake, turned with a smile, and smashed it against Maya's face. The crowd gasped. Some laughed nervously, others froze, wine glasses trembling in their hands. Maya stood there, cream dripping down her cheeks, the taste of sugar sharp against the bitterness in her throat. For a moment the ballroom was suspended in silence, every eye locked on her. The heiress laughed lightly, dismissing it as a joke, as though Maya's humiliation were entertainment. But in that silence the truth pulsed louder than the music. This wasn't a joke. It was an act of dominance, a public reminder that to some, no matter her brilliance, Maya didn't belong. Her heart pounded, but she didn't lash out. Not yet. She scanned the faces around her, executives, investors, decision-makers. Some avoided her gaze, others smirked, complicit in the cruelty. And then there were a few, uneasy, shifting, realizing the ugliness they had just witnessed. Maya wiped her face with steady hands. The room leaned in, waiting for her reaction, the silence stretching like a wire ready to snap. Would she swallow the insult and keep the deal alive? Or would she strike back in a way no one expected? Because what no one knew was that Maya had more power in her hands than the heiress could ever imagine. And before the night was over, that $4 billion partnership would hang in the balance. The ballroom's silence weighed heavier than the crystal. chandeliers above. Maya's face still stung from the frosting, her dignity hanging by a thread. She looked at the heiress, smirking, smug, convinced she had reduced her to nothing but a spectacle. For a heartbeat, Maya considered walking away, but then she remembered the deal, the investors, the silent eyes calculating whether she would break. With deliberate calm, Maya reached for a napkin. The crowd exhaled, thinking she'd choose composure, thinking she'd swallow the humiliation. But instead, she walked, step by step, straight toward the podium where the heiress still stood. Each click of her heels echoed like a drumbeat of defiance. Maya didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She simply picked up the microphone, and in front of the world's elite, she turned the humiliation back into power. She spoke of respect, of value, of how billion-dollar partnerships could not exist where dignity was destroyed. Every word cut sharper than glass, slicing through the polished lies of civility in that room. The heiress shifted, her smile faltering, her privilege cracking under the weight of truth she could not dismiss. Then Maya did the unthinkable. She announced that the partnership, the $4 billion empire they had come to celebrate, was over. Her company would not stand with one that mocked and diminished the very people who built its success. The ballroom erupted. Gasps, murmurs, frantic whispers. Investors clutched their phones. The heiress's face drained of color, diamonds no longer, glittering but suffocating against her skin. And as Maya set down the microphone, she locked eyes with the heiress one last time, calm, unshaken. A silent warning. You tried to break me, but instead, you broke everything you thought you owned. The night had shifted, the empire had cracked, and the world was watching. When Maya walked out of that ballroom, she didn't just leave behind a ruined evening. She left behind a shattered illusion. The empire that had once seemed untouchable now trembled, not because of the loss of billions, but because it had been exposed. A single act of arrogance had revealed what so many already knew, that racism doesn't hide in the shadows. It thrives in the spotlight, cloaked in wealth, in tradition, in unchecked privilege. For Maya, the sting of that cake would fade, but the memory of the silence, the smirks, the complicit laughter, would not. Yet what defined her wasn't the humiliation inflicted on her, but the strength with which she reclaimed her power. She proved that dignity, once defended, is more valuable than any contract. And beyond that ballroom, her story echoed. In boardrooms, in classrooms, in quiet conversations around dinner tables, people ask themselves, what would I have done if I was in that room? Would I have stayed silent, or would I have stood with her? Because that is the truth this story leaves us with. Racism doesn't just exist in the cruelty of one action, but in the silence of the many who watch it happen. And every silence is a choice. So the question isn't just about Maya anymore. It's about us. How many more humiliations, how many more acts of hate will we allow before we decide that silence is no longer an option? Her story may have ended with the fall of a billion-dollar deal, but ours is still being written. And the next chapter depends on what we choose to do when we see injustice standing right in front of us.